Okay. This morning I had a question from Mary about starting over from the very beginning. And I just want to reiterate that I am going to start from the very beginning every single time we start a session, okay? Because it's that rote memory of steps 1 through 10 that we have to get committed and really sealed into a brain pathway so that we don't get stuck. Because as we know, like Photoshop is a very big program, and getting stuck when we don't know absolutely everything there is to know about the user interface is really frustrating, and I don't want that to happen to you. So having said that, then this morning, first I want to ask, are there any other questions? Because I just got that email from Mary, so I want to check with everybody else. Any questions at all?
I just found out you can change the color of those textures.
Yes.
No,
Isn't that fun?
Wow. Huh. Really? Huh.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Has anyone been trying to do anything that we did day before or yesterday?
Yes.
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 Very good. Okay. Excellent. I like that go for it attitude. It's really important, particularly after today, if you're not feeling comfortable with how we move things in and how we affect layers. It's really important to get started trying, because only when we are trying do we run into issues that then foster questions. Okay. So I am going to share my screen and get everything put away here. Okay, so I have my Lightroom screen up, and I think you all might see now an image of a barn and some wheat at Antietam Battlefield.
Beautiful.
And
Wow.
I
Gorgeous.
have, oh, thank you for that little wow. It's nice. I thought we'd put a texture on this just for fun, but before I do that, I want to work a little bit on this dark green tree very, very quickly to get some of the shadow out of that, okay? So I'm going to go to my Lightroom Develop, and I've already brought my shadows up at +30, and I don't really want to increase my shadows other places. So I'm going to very, very carefully take an adjustment brush and only in the shadows increase what we're doing here. And of course, it's going to be way too much. Don't worry. It looks to me like my brush is very hard here. Yes, my feather at 100 or thereabouts. Because I've only told it to work in the shadows, because if I increase exposure, then the sky behind it is going to get very much lighter as well, and I really don't want that. This will just take a second, I promise.
I do think it's pretty amazing how you can do that.
I do too.
Yeah.
You're doing that with Lightroom?
Yes, I am doing this with Lightroom with a targeted adjustment brush, Sherwood, so I'm only working in this area. I'm not working in any other area of the image. And
you do that with Photoshop?
no, but what you could do in Photoshop, we could do with an adjustment layer, but I want to have it in my original, in my Lightroom. And now I'm going to tone down this change quite a bit because it's really quite strong and it's going to look patchy and odd. And remember, if we want to see where we've painted, which I know pretty much where I painted here, but if we have a doubt about it, we turn on our Show Selected Mask Overlay, and that shows where I've painted and where I'm not. And now I'm going to turn this effect down a little bit so it looks a little more natural. And so that's finished. I'm out of my brush, and I'll show you where we started. Here's where we started. And there's where we went. So we can see the leaves, okay? And so now I want to take the image into Photoshop. So we're going to either go Photo, Edit in Photoshop, or we can hit Command E. So this will take it into, and I'm going to render using Lightroom. It'll take it into Photoshop. That message just came up because I'm not using the same version of Adobe Camera Raw in Lightroom as I am in Photoshop. The Lightroom is the later version and the Photoshop is not. So that's why I got that question. Okay, now we have this image in Photoshop, and I am just going to point out something. And that I'm going to make this much bigger so you can see it. It's shocking to me how much detail is in that wheat. Look at that.
Wow.
Amazing, isn't it?
Mhm.
Amazing.
Yeah,
And
That's
the little
called-
flowers.
a
Yeah, little
Sony
clover, yeah.
sensor. Okay, so now I'm thinking about bringing in a texture layer. And I'm going to make my Photoshop a little bit smaller so that I can get to my desktop and we can see. Now there are two ways to do this. As I mentioned yesterday, hang in there with me for just a second while I get these things moved around. I need that. Here we are. Okay, my apologies for that. As I mentioned the day before yesterday, a number of people, and correctly so, keep their images, their texturing images in Lightroom, in preferably in a folder that has textures or something else that denotes that. I don't, because I tried to do all my texturing on my big desktop, so I don't put those things in my Lightroom catalog. They're just here on my desktop. So if you have something on your desktop, then you go out of Photoshop and I can click into this folder and I could then have a look at this. These are some of the texture layers that I sent to you and say, okay, what do I want this to feel like? And I would encourage you to think about the word feel before you think about the word look. What do I want it to feel like? And so in this instance, it's a pastoral scene, it's a farm scene. Maybe I want it to look older, more like an older photograph. And so I might think about then using this texture, demi-jour, and possibly even tabula on top of it. I don't know. Let's see. So I'm going to choose the two of them and I'm going to drag them and drop them over here into my image. Okay? So this is the very easy way to do this, and it only brought the one image. That's frustrating. Okay. As opposed to, remember when we were bringing things in, oh, it brought the other, good. When we were bringing things in from Lightroom, which I will do in just a minute, where you have to do the window and arrange all. When we bring them from outside on our desktop, we can drop it right onto our photograph. Does that make sense to everyone?
Would you ever use the textures in Lightroom?
No, you can't use textures in Lightroom because you can't do what we're doing in Lightroom. You can't put one image on top of another.
Okay.
I wish we could, but we can't. Okay, so now I have two textures right here, smack in the middle of my image, and they're a little bit in the way. I'm going to move us and put over here. And remember how important it was to have gray space around your image? So I have gray space around my image. I had it before we started and it's still there. But now I've got these two here and I don't know what to do. So I'm going to turn off the top one and I'm going to move my mouse down to my layer where it says demi-jour. Because if I were still on this layer and I had turned off my eyeball and I go to transform that, I wouldn't be able to see it because it's invisible. So I have to make sure that I'm working in my active layer. Okay? And to transform this texture layer, so everybody remember we go to Command T, and if I don't hold my Shift key, it's going to enlarge the texture and keep the same ratio. To stretch out my texture, I have to hold the shift key, or I can bring it here, and then I can bring it here. And as long as I still have blue lines all around this, I can't do anything to my texture. I need to either hit the check mark or press the word enter or press return on our keyboard. Is that clear for everyone? Okay, so now I can start with changing my blending mode. And then you're going to say, well, but you still got that other layer up on top. That's true, but I like to work with them one at a time rather than trying to have too many at a time working. So let's go to our blending mode and let's start looking. Here's darken. Here's multiply, which is kind of cool. I like that. There's color burn, not cool. Linear burn, ugly. Darker color, not great. And then lighten, no. Screen, no. Color dodge, no. Linear, no. Lighter color, no. Overlay, you can see what's happening in the overlay in the upper right-hand corner much more easily than the rest of the image. And soft light has a very similar effect to overlay, but just at a, it's just, I don't know, less in your face, less overt, okay? So there's overlay and here's soft light. So far, I'm kind of liking multiply. So I'm going to click multiply. Yes.
And you're using this at 100%, right?
Yes. So I was doing the preview of them at 100%. But
Okay.
Excuse me, Karen, we call these textures, but the one you're working with right now almost looks like a solid color. I'm not seeing a texture on your screen. I'm not seeing the effect on the picture, the image.
okay, so here's the before and here's the after.
Okay.
Okay. Does that help, Ruth?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So I'm going to draw the opacity down because I really don't like it too awfully dark. Okay, so I'm going to go down to about 75%. So here's my before and here's my after. Before, after. I like what it's doing up in the clouds and I'm okay with what it's done here. I'm going to turn this, I want you to see this texture in the normal way, and I'm going to turn that up to 100%. So there's what that texture looks like. So if you have a doubt about what your texture was looking like, you can always go back, put your blending mode to normal, and when it's in normal, you can still have your background on, and have a look and say, okay, what am I really working with? Or what is it in the corner that I don't like or I do like? And then you can work with that, okay?
This makes me want to ask another question.
Yes.
You could also apply it to part of your image?
Yes, you could, very easily. Okay, and we're going to do that in just a little bit. Okay, so that's before and that's after. All right, now there are lots of things in this image that I'm not happy with. This is a work in progress, and I've never textured this image. I've never used the textures that I pulled out. I just pulled them out at random with the feeling that maybe I want to make it look like an older photograph. Okay, so this is to encourage you all to play, experiment. Don't be thinking that you have to have a result right off the top, because that's not going to happen, okay? All right, now I'm going to go up to the next layer. Remember, we put that second texture in. I'm going to turn my eyeball on, and now I have to what?
Turn the other one off.
Command T to make it resize, right? And I'm going to hold my shift key so I can just pull out my edges the way I want them.
You didn't have to turn the other one off.
No, no, because I'm on my active layer on top. And now I want to apply this layer. So I hit my check mark and I want to apply it with my other one turned on so I can see how they interact. Okay. So here's multiply, making it way dark and really weird. I'm going to skip right down to overlay. Now this is getting to where I want it to look like. And I know you're going to say, what are you talking about, Karen? It looks like it has a disease, but we need to bring the opacity down a little bit. So instead of bringing opacity down, what does soft light look like? You see, here's overlay and here's soft light. And I kind of like soft light better in here, okay? And now let me bring my opacity down a little bit.
Went out.
Not hearing us.
Yeah.
All right.
Karen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, because we lost you for a minute.
Oh,
The beginning.
It was breaking up.
oh, okay. And it's good now?
It's
Yes.
good now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So,
I think we're okay.
okay, great. So what I did was I brought this tabula in. I turned it to soft light because I didn't like the way this looked. And none of these was going to work. I already knew that. The color dodge is weird. And overlay just seemed to be a little bit too strong. And so I went to soft light, I chose that, and then I brought the opacity from 100 down to about 75 again. Okay, so here was our before, and here's our after. Now, Ruth had a very good question about, well, couldn't you put it just on part of the image? Yes, and I don't like the way the tabula has really destroyed my enjoyment of the really fine texture of all the wheat. So I am going to come and put a mask, which we go down here to our bottom to our adjustment panel. Does everyone see where my cursor is?
Mhm.
In the lower right? And if we hover over that, it says add layer mask. So I'm going to click on that. And my layer mask went to the layer that was active. Remember, I'm on the tabula layer because I don't like how strong tabula is down here in my wheat, and I want to take some of that off. So if I'm on a white mask, the white mask tells us that everything that we've done in here is being revealed. It's all white. The full effect of the texture layer is there. And so to have any effect, I have to paint with what color paintbrush? Black. So we can hit the X key and change that, or go over to our left-hand side and with this little right angle arrow sign, click it back and forth. So I want to paint with black. Now, I don't want to clone with black. That's my clone stamp tool. I want to paint with black. Now here's where we get to talk about brushes, okay? One of the most important things about working with brushes, with texture layers, and anything that you're doing in Photoshop is to not have your brush at 100% opacity. I have a friend who works only around 8 or 9%. I think that's a little tedious. I'm going to put my brush down to about 20% opacity. I am going to increase my flow about 50%. Okay. My smoothing at 10% is fine. That's just fine. So to make my brush bigger or smaller, then, okay, what's going on here? That's weird. That's very strange. Because to make your brush bigger or smaller, it is a matter of, all this is correct.
We're here.
I'm sorry? It's a Photoshop thing. I can't stand it. I need to make my brush a different size. So it's doing it, it's just not showing it to me. I don't want this to be a smart object. Okay, we're gonna bring this tabula back in because Photoshop did a very strange thing and wanted to turn it into a smart object, and I do not want it to be a smart object. So we're gonna bring them both back in, okay? Not fun. So here we go. We're going to choose my tabula and my demi-jour, and I'm going to bring them both in and drop them. There we are. There's one. And when Photoshop first brings them in, they do bring them in to where you can resize them right away, which is what I'm going to do with this. And then click my check mark to say okay and commit that layer. Okay, and here comes my tabula layer. Oh,
What made that pop up all of a sudden?
I'm sorry?
What made that pop up all of a sudden?
I
You said
have,
here it is.
I have no idea. Oh, what made it pop up? It was waiting to be read. So it's just the Photoshop engine taking its time.
I see.
Okay, so demi-jour, and we're going to change it to multiply at 70-some%, which is where we were before and after. And here we are on tabula. Oh, I think I know what's happening. So when we bring them in the manner that I did and drop them in on top, Photoshop automatically makes it a smart object. So.
Is that just with two or with just one texture?
Either, any number.
Oh,
But you see, it's a glitch because now I'm doing exactly the same thing that I wanted to do before, which is to increase my brush size by clicking my left and right bracket keys. And my opacity on my brush is 23%. My flow is 50, exactly where we left it. And now I'm simply going to paint out, and I have to make my brush smaller. I hope you all can see that. I'm going to just stroke out a little bit of the change that the tabula was making. And we should start to see, if you look over in my layer mask, some gray coming in there. Can you see here?
yeah.
And so I am clicking, and it's just like little brush strokes, okay? So I'm clicking and dragging and painting in that area where I thought that the tabula was too strong. It destroyed the beautiful look of the wheat that I enjoyed so much in my original photo, okay?
So Karen, you're not covering the whole thing. You're just doing little bits here and there.
And so if you look at my mask, you can see where I've painted. It's kind of this swooping area down here, which is going to reveal the texture in the wheat. Are you able to see this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's the area I've painted. And because it's not solid black, you can tell that as I'm having to click and stroke and click and stroke and click and stroke, I'm doing a little bit at a time at 23% opacity. Okay. So I don't want it, if I wanted it solid black, I think it would take too much of the effect out. So let's disable this layer mask. So that's with the full effect on, and that's with it brushed out, or mostly brushed out. I'll do it again. So that's with the full effect of the tabula layer, and that's with just this area brushed out. Okay. So I think that you can see conceptually then, if we can add a layer mask and use parts of our texture layer, that we have a lot of possibility with that. And now that I see it, I like what it's doing up in the sky. I'm not crazy about what it's done on these buildings. And so I'm going to take a smaller brush, and again, at that low opacity, just slowly brush that out. Now here's a warning for you. Often people get confused because they've been over here in their layers and they've looked, or they've gone here and done something, and then they think, oh, I want to brush that out of that barn. And if I start brushing now, you see, it's not going to let me do this. I have to paint on a layer mask, all right? So we have to be on the active layer, and we have to be with our mask, our active, we're painting in our mask. And to know that we're doing that, we see this white rectangle around our layer mask. Does everybody see that?
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm going to continue painting because I like I like taking the effect out of some of the white areas of the barn. And this is because I'm working with a completely soft brush. We don't get hard edges. The edges start to get a little bit harder the smaller the brush we use, but it's all going to look very natural and not have any, it's going to just be painterly, okay?
Karen, you have the opacity at 20%.
Correct, on my
If-
brush.
If you do it twice, does it make it 40%?
No, it layers up the 20% of the effect. So you eventually can get almost to black, but it takes some time. Okay,
Can I ask another question?
please.
Is there a choice of brush, and how do you know what to choose if there is?
There is a choice of brush, but in texture layer, you almost always, like always, want to have this very soft brush, which is the first one. It's under general, okay? And you want to have your hardness down to 0, and then you can change your size depending, you can change your size with your left and right bracket keys. Okay?
And when would you ever use the other brushes? Or is that more of a graphics thing or something?
It's very much more of a graphic thing. You can use, what you might want to do is to change your hardness in your brush if you were working very in close. Let's say that I wanted to only affect the fence line over here. See this little fence line? Then I would want to bring my brush hardness up to about 60% or so that I could be assured that I was only getting that fence line. Right now, the brush where I'm working at 0% hardness is very much like the feather in Lightroom at 100%. It's the very center area of the brush that goes full on, and then it fades out to 0. And it gives you a clue with this little icon up here of the brush. You can see a solid white very much in the center, and then it fades out to the gray that surrounds it. Okay?
Okay.
So let's build up now. So here we were in the beginning, and then we added the demi-jour. And the reason I really added it was to bring this kind of amber tone into everything. Okay? And I don't know that it's added enough amber tone, so I'm going to do something else with that in just a minute. But then I added the tabula because I wanted to have a stronger effect in the sky up here. An older, crinkly, weird kind of thing. But I didn't like what the tabula did in my wheat, so I put a layer mask on and I brushed out with a low opacity, taking my time. I brushed out the effect of the tabula very strong right here in the front, and then just fading it in as we went toward the back.
Did that action affect the demi-jour at all?
No, not at all. It only affects what I'm doing with the tabula. Demi-jour, because it does not have a layer mask on it and nothing's been done, is fully in effect across the whole image, but it is in effect only at 73%. Remember? And here's my tabula. Again, a tabula only at 68%. Now, sometimes I go back and have a look and say, well, maybe I want to increase my effect now that I brushed it out of certain areas. And yeah, I still like it back here at 65 or so %. Okay, any questions about that?
I have another question. So now if you wanted to go back to the demi-jour and say maybe that was too strong or needed to be stronger.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
just click on that and can change that.
Oh, yes. But what
And
we would do so that you could see it is to turn off the eyeball on the tabula and have your demi-jour layer highlighted. And maybe I decide I don't like the multiply. Maybe I want to change it to overlay, which really makes it, here, I'll show you the before and after. So here's before and here's after. It puts a pretty strong vignette on the image, but I do like what it's doing in this wheat area right here because it's added some light. Because if you look at the texture itself, forgive me for jumping all over, but here's the texture all by itself. You see where it's light right here? Okay. In overlay mode, then that's added that lightness in the wheat area. And remember, it was vignetted, so over here it's darker and we're getting this funky blue issue going on. So before, you see how that now it's a nice even light across the wheat, but now we're adding a highlight to the left and darkening to the right.
Could you stretch out your texture to get the light area on the right too?
Yes, that's exactly right, Sherwood. Or we might want to just add a mask, take a great big brush, and bring this area down so it's not so funky looking. Okay, so it's having a bit of an effect as and again, I'm only painting at 23%, and you can see on my layer mask where I've painted. So I am just slightly lessening the effect of the texture layer in that area. So here's my before. See how even this is across? And here's after. So I still have a little bit of the vignetting effect. I think it's a little bit strong back here, so I'm going to take that down. So it's very, very much like painting, okay? And you can look at my layer mask and you can see where I took that effect of that texture layer out. Not 100%, but almost all out. And I actually kind of like this, the way it looks now. It's not finished, but I like the direction it's going in. And because I like it, I'm going to do something very tricky now. I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to duplicate it by dragging it down to where that little icon that says, if we hang over there, add a layer, okay, create new layer. So by dragging that demi-jour down, it doubled up and it copied the layer mask that was with it. Now here's the tricky part.
Again,
Yes?
you.
Karen,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes, I'm here.
we're losing you.
Oh no,
We're losing you. Oh,
I'm here. Hi,
okay.
everybody got me?
We missed what you said after. Yes.
But we missed the whole part about the duplicate
Right.
layer.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to trash it, okay? And now what I said was that I like what's happening here, but I also want to use the demi-jour in the multiply mode that we had before. So I'm going to click my active layer. I can't stress this enough. We have to be sure that this layer is active. I'm going to click it and drag it down to my duplicate layer, and there it is. So now it's showed up with that mask intact, but I might not want to use that mask. Let's have a look. I'm going to change my blending mode to multiply, and I'm going to bring that opacity down to about 60-some%. So here it was before, just a little bit too bright. And here it is where we're getting that darker sunsetty feeling. And you notice that I've only put that in at about 38%. Now I'm going to decide if I want to keep the mask or get rid of it. And by holding down the control key and clicking in that mask, I can choose disable. And so now it's dark on that side, or I can hold control and again, and then click enable. And I think I'll leave the mask on it. I like it that way. And now, just to be sure that I really do like everything, I'm going to put my tabular layer back on. I'm going to turn these off. So here's the original image. And then I went back and changed this whole demi-jour, and I put it in overlay mode because it brought up some light in the wheat here. And then I added just a little bit of darkening overall. And then I added the little crackly tabular layer on top.
Is there an order in which to add these layers, or is it purely by what makes you feel good?
It's mostly what makes you feel good, except when you're duplicating layers. I do recommend that you duplicate and keep your layers together. Like, I wouldn't take this layer and have it on top of the tabular layer. Now, it doesn't actually make much difference in the image. Well, it does actually. If I put it up here, there's a little lighter effect. I'd keep both of my duplicated layers together. And I have had images where I've used the same texture layer in 3 different blending modes. And it does create a very different effect. Often, people will, when they're doing texturing, they'll take an overlay mode at 100% and they'll drag this down and duplicate it and then hit it again. You can see what a strong effect it had.
Could you could you go back and start us with the eyeballs down at the background and just take us up so I can see what each one did again?
Mm-hmm. So here's our first demi-jour layer where I had it in, it's kind of a new layer. I put it in at overlay mode at 100% opacity, which is showing right here, okay? And then I put the layer mask on it and painted out some of that effect in the areas that you see as gray in the layer mask, okay? And then I came back and I put my next demi-jour layer in using that, the next one was using the multiply mode, and I turned it all the way down to 38% only. And then I went back with the tabula, and remember again with the layer mask painting out the effect in the buildings and in this front area of the wheat. And then I just had the crazy idea to show you how doubled up layers in the same blending modes cause very strong effects. So if I didn't feel in this, here is my original, here's my overlay mode, and it's at 100%. If I wanted more of what that layer was doing, people do often double up on something like that. And maybe I don't want it full on at 100%, but I really like this golden tone that I'm getting now in the wheat. So maybe I just want to bring it down a little bit, a little bit of subtlety, and then go ahead and put my multiply layer on, and then my tabula. And now I have really golden wheat, and I have some gold tones coming up here. This blue corner of the sky is kind of okay because it's, it's on to sunset. The moon is just rising. So, yeah. Okay. Again, this evening, I really am still showing you conceptually what we can do with the layers and the masking. And so tonight we've started with bringing images in a different manner right off the desktop, right onto our photo, rather than having to do the arrange all. And I'm going to do that in just a minute. But we brought the photos in, and we've used now several different kinds of blending modes. We've used different opacities on each of the layers, and we've used a layer mask to affect where our texture layer is being seen and to what degree in the image itself. Okay. Any questions conceptually about what we're doing there?
You get the different modes by clicking on what is now at soft light.
Correct. That is our
Okay.
blending mode. And when we start out Sherwood, it always is normal. That's the key. We have to look for the word normal and then choose which blending mode we want to use. And yes. Mhm.
Erin, do you have to flatten this before you save it, or when do you flatten things?
No, the only time a flatten is an F word, Susie. Okay. It's my attempt at humor. But if you
I
just
like that.
yeah. And why? Because we lose
wow.
all our work and we can't go back and affect anything or do anything differently. So all you want to do if you're coming out of Lightroom is hit Command S. Don't go up to File. Here's a big no-no. Do not go to File and Save As. No, no, no. No, no, no. Just-
Karen, suppose you want to come back and work on it to the next day or whatever.
Mhm.
It saves in Photoshop as well, doesn't it?
Yes, it is saved in Photoshop, but you should not open it from Photoshop if it is in your Lightroom library.
Oh,
So hit Command S and go to your Lightroom library if you want to start the next day and open it up. And you do that by opening your photo in Lightroom and you go to Edit in Photoshop. And because it's a PSD or a TIFF, however you have your preferences set, it's going to ask you if you want to work a copy or if you want to work the original. You want to work the original because the original Photoshop document is the document that has the layers. So Susie, to answer your question, had you flattened that before you saved it, and the only reason we have flattened is to make smaller files, had you flattened it, you would never be able to retrieve those layers again.
Okay. And one
Okay.
quick question, could you go to File and just save? Is that the
Yes.
same Command Save? Okay. But
Yes,
not
but
save.
hitting Command Save or Command S is a whole lot safer because people go to File and they think they've hit Save and they slipped and they hit Save As instead, and then they get into a world of trouble. So just Command S, and that's going to put it back in your Lightroom folder structure right beside your original raw image. Okay? Now, the other problem that people get into is that they've pulled their image or they've opened their image in Photoshop from a Lightroom collection. And then they hit the Command S and they'll say, well, I did exactly what you told me and it's not there. And they're looking for it in the collection. It is not going to be saved to your collection. It is going to be saved into the folder where your original image is. Remember that collections are simply pointers to images. Now you can put your Photoshop document in the collection, but you have to go back and find it in your original image folder first.
So you should open it in the original, not in the
Ideally,
collection.
you can open it from the collection. The easy, then we get into how do you find things in Lightroom and we can go over that. But it's either way is fine. It's just if you know how to navigate in your Lightroom. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, there's no should. It's just if you're familiar with how to find your original file, which you can do by using the file number, which is why I never change my file numbers, then they're easy enough to locate. Okay. I can show you how to do that. So I'm just bringing up my Lightroom. It's being very pokey. I'm going to minimize my Photoshop. Nope, that was my Lightroom. Okay. This image, let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to hit Command S. And you'll know that it's saving by looking down here at the lower left-hand corner for the progress bar. Okay. So we have to let it do its thing. It's a pretty big file. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 85. So it's almost a half a gigabyte file.
Wow.
I don't know
So
why.
we
Oh.
would have gone to this place this spring, right?
I'm sorry?
We would have gone to this battlefield this spring.
Yes.
What, not with the wheat?
Not with the
What
wheat.
color?
No.
Boy, that really makes a dynamic image, Karen, the wheat being that color. Wow.
Mhm.
Isn't it? It really helped, didn't it?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It reminds me of being in the Palouse in the fall.
Yes.
Ew.
Yes. Of
Makes
course,
me
the
wanna-
battlefield is a very different feel. And
Yes.
in some areas it feels very expansive, in other areas it feels very intimate. This is one of the more open areas. This is Poffenberger Farm. There are a number of farms that were where the battle was centered, and the battle just swirled all around the farms. There's Poffenberger Farm, there's Mama Farm, there's the battle at Bloody Lane, there's a it starts with an S. Anyhow, there's a number of farms all through it, and they're all I can't say that they were in quite as good shape in 1862. It's a little bit Disney-fied, it's a national park, but they're all still intact, and the Park Service takes care of them. And there are farmers that rent the land that come in and keep the land tilled and planted like it would have been. So. Okay, maybe it wasn't a good idea to save this, but it's important that we see it. We're
Is
going
it
to do
just-
another image, and we're going to choose something very different.
Can we do 2 from Lightroom instead of a texture? Just to
Yes.
see- Okay.
Karen, can you repeat what you said about if you've saved it and it's gone back to Lightroom and then you want to work on it again? Was the question whether you should work on a copy or not? I can't remember.
Right, so it's going to ask you, do you want a copy of it or do you want the original? And you always want to work on the original,
Okay.
okay?
And
Because
another,
that way you get all of your layers and your work that you had before.
Okay.
another question, Karen.
Yes.
So just reiterating, so you made a duplicate copy just because you wanted to try another blending effect? Is that why you did that?
No, because I wanted to double up the effect of the overlay mode.
Oh, double up. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So it's just like, that first punch hits you and it just wasn't quite enough. So boom, hit it again, just to make sure that you really got it.
Mhm.
Could you also
And
do,
it does work. Surprisingly, using the same texture layer in different blending modes, there are interesting effects that come from it. And this is where I say all the time, you have to play, 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 and play some more. Because you learn as you're going through it. Oh, maybe it'll increase what I want if I do this, if I double that up, or triple it even. Okay?
Karen,
Yes.
something I do when I have something that I sort of like and I want to play with it,
Mhm.
I'll make a copy before I change it so that I can always go back.
Yes. Yes, it's completely valid, Sherwood. Absolutely, entirely valid. So working on a copy is fine. Yeah, then you do get to, just as a warning, as I said, this file is going to be pretty close to a half of a gigabyte or more. Then you do get to eating up disk drive space pretty quickly, but storage is cheap, so that's okay.
Karen, I
Yes.
want to look through my pictures and find one to practice with. What are your suggestions for selecting a photo?
A fairly simplified composition to start with. And in fact, we're going to do something with a very simple composition next. Okay.
Thank you.
The one we're looking at is a straightforward composition, but it's got a number of different elements in it. And we're going to use, okay, so this image was 1.5 gigabytes. So no wonder it took so long.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so we did the save. Now I'm going to close this and say bye-bye. And there's no reason to have this open. Save that. And now we're going to go to Lightroom, and an unexpected end of file error occurred.
You just can't win.
Yeah.
It's
This
actually
is-
good though to see this happens to you so that we understand.
Yes, I agree.
yeah, it's really not
Bound
cool.
to happen to me.
Oh,
Yeah, maybe
no.
that's why it was taking so long. Let's see if it comes up here. Because it says PSD, but it's not showing anything quite yet.
Where
Yeah,
does it show, where does it say PSD, please?
right here in my file name to the lower left. See, this is our
Thank you.
location. Here's
Got
our
it.
folder, and this answers a little bit the question. So I wanted to show you that it did come right back in to, now it's there. It just took a while to read. So it came in exactly beside my raw file. Okay. Now, if I want to work on this, I want to go to Photo, Edit in Adobe Photoshop, and now it's going to say,
I
oh,
see.
what do you want to do? Okay. Edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. Well, no. Edit a copy, which Sherwood was talking about, yes. Or edit original. Either one of those. Okay.
So you're now on the PSD file.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
And so the question was, if I worked on it one day and I want to come back the next day and work a little bit more on what I did, how do I make sure that I get back to the image that has the layers? And here are your options. Edit copy, edit original. Okay.
Would you go back to when you first started starting the next day, you go to the image, then what did you do?
And then I go to photo,
Photo.
edit in, just like we do originally, Photoshop, and then it brings this dialogue because it's not a raw file. So it has to ask us, oh, well, wait a minute, what do you want to do here? This is a different type of file.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, now I'm going to show you, just for grins, side by side, the two images.
Really.
Now,
Love
I mean,
the highlights. The
I'm sorry?
highlight,
It is better.
the beautiful golden tone.
yeah.
It's just so much more like a piece of art.
Mhm.
Well, some people would agree, Suzette, and some people would disagree vehemently.
Right.
We don't need to take up that argument here. I do think that, I mean, the whole title of this course is about deepening your creative expression. Okay. And so if I wanted to make this image look the way that that looks on the left-hand side, then, you know, that's my artistic expression. I think that it is, in my own personal opinion, a touch overdone, but I do want you all to see the effects and what are possible. So I'm letting things go a little stronger than I might normally do.
Are we looking, is the one on the right the raw image or the,
The one on the right is the raw developed image in Lightroom.
okay, so that's
The one on
after
the left
the
is my
you made.
Photoshop document with the texture layers.
Mhm.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. And you know, if you want to get in, if people want to get into arguments with you about this kind of thing, just use the word illustrative. Just say, look, I wanted it to be very illustrative, and then they don't know what to say. Okay.
Gotcha.
It's just as valid as a painting.
Yeah,
Well,
of course.
if everyone liked the same art, it would be a very boring world.
Wouldn't
I
it be?
agree,
Oh, that's
Sherwood, yeah.
You're absolutely right. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to take an image out of a collection. Just so, okay, simplified image. Here we go. Okay, simple image. Okay, this is on Whidbey Island. It's my favorite building on Whidbey Island. And there just happens to be a big fog happening. And so I'm looking at this image and I'm thinking, well, what would I do to it with textures? Well, the mood of the image is very somber. It's very kind of moody and misty and, you know, all those things that fog does for us. And the little silhouettes of the trees in the back are nice. And yeah, so when I choose my texture layers, I'm going to be thinking in those terms. I'm not going to be thinking about, well, it's a barn. What do I want to texture a barn with? No, I want to use my textures to enhance the intent that I had when I made the original image, and perhaps how the image came out. So that's what I want to be thinking about. So I'm going to go to Photo, Edit in Adobe Photoshop. I'm going to render using Lightroom. Okay, and Mary, to answer your question, I'm going to get rid of my Lightroom here. I don't have images, I don't have textures. I will next time, but I can open these textures in a different way rather than the dragging and the dropping. So I'm going to choose actually I'm going to choose 3 very different images, and I'm going to go to File, Open with Adobe Photoshop. And you'll see that these line them up just like we had yesterday. Do we see up here where we've got all of these lined up on top? Well, we can't do a daggone thing with those. I can't take this and drag it onto anything. It won't work. So I have to go to Window, Arrange, Float All in Windows. And now they're all free. You see? I still have plenty of gray space around my original image, which is great. And I move my images by watching for my solid black arrow with a white line around it, and I grab up in that top layer. Okay, this top area. I can't grab it here because no matter what tool, this is very important, no matter what tool I have chosen on the left-hand side, and right now I happen to have my brush tool chosen, if I go to this outer area, it changes to where I can move that floating image. Okay?
You
So
go
now I want
window,
to
arrange, and then what?
float all in Windows. Okay? So I'm going to
So
go over to my
when you say you have to drag it from that top, what do you call that top thing where it's
the frame.
Frame.
okay, top
Frame.
frame, okay.
Okay? Or you could call it the header bar, but it's the frame of the image.
Okay.
But now remember, we've got it floating around, and that's great because we have to be able to see our layer behind, or actually our other image behind. And so that's okay. But to get it onto our image, we have to pull our layer onto our image.
Oh,
Uh,
oh God.
Okay?
I just got lost. Is this an alternative way to doing it from your first illustration, from the first photo you worked on?
Yes, because Mary asked me to show her the way that we did it yesterday. Okay? Because there are 2 ways to bring images in. And that is if you have them in your Lightroom catalog and you open a couple of images at once, they're all going to open up and be tacked across that top bar together. And you can't take a layer and put it on another image, which is why we have to go to the Window, Arrange, Float All in Windows, so that they all become separate. See how they're all separate back here?
And these images came from Lightroom. You had them in a folder on Lightroom?
I actually had them on my desktop, and I just clicked Open with Photoshop, and it tacked them all across that top bar.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right,
But
so I've got my,
Karen, if you just slide them on separately, you don't have to separate them. They're
that's
then
correct.
separated immediately.
That is correct. But if your texture layers live in Lightroom, You have to do what I'm doing with the window arrange float all.
Okay.
Karen, one last question. If you have your textures in Lightroom, can't you just go edit in, open in Photoshop as layers, and they'll all get in as layers?
That is one way to do it, Susie. If you were opening if you wanted to open 5 textures at a time,
Okay.
you could do that because it would put it all in one document, and then you would just pull that layer from it over onto your original file. But I think that's an extra layer of confusion.
Okay.
Okay.
Karen, if your layers were on your desktop, would you still be doing it this same way?
You could do it the way that I did in the beginning, which was to open them and drag them straight onto your photo. Or you could do it the way I just did it, which was to go, let me do it again for you, which was to go to my texture layers, open my folder, and I'm going to choose 2 more just for fun, and go to File, Open with Adobe Photoshop. And you see how they're all pinned up here together again?
Uh-huh.
Okay, then we have to go to the Window, Arrange, Float All in Windows. And now they're all loose.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Is
And
there
don't-
any advantage to having them in Lightroom? Because it seems more complicated. Their textures.
The advantage is so you don't have to go hunting on your desktop or in your file structure in
Okay.
your computer, because some people get, aren't certain where things get put sometimes in their file structure on their computer. And sometimes their desktops look like mine, which if you saw mine right now, you'd laugh. In other words, messy. So it's just however you feel comfortable. And we're going to, again, when we meet next, we're going to open them both ways. So we add some more clarity around this because people do work in 2 different ways. Okay.
In case anybody wonders, my textures are on my desktop, so I go to Finder, and that's how I can, in the
Yes.
Finder menu, I can find my textures really quickly.
Yes. And that's completely valid. Okay. So I brought a bunch of different textures in, and Ruth's question was, what kind of image would you suggest I start with? And I said, a simple image. And so we have a simple image, but I've brought in one of my favorite textures of all time, and it's called Scotia. And what do I have to do to resize this image? And remember, I've got my frame opened up. I've got gray area around my image. So my next step is
Shift.
Control T.
Command
Command T.
Oh, T.
Okay. And so then if I don't hold my shift, it resizes in the same ratio, and then I hold my shift and I drag it out this way. And then the next very important step, click your check mark. And now we have the 2 layers. We have the original file underneath the photo, and then we have this layer. And now we get to change our blending mode. And notice if I'm right here on my background layer and I want to go, okay, I want to change my blending mode, I can't even do it. It's grayed out. Okay. I have to make my texture layer my active layer. And I click my blending mode, darken, multiply. That's very moody. Overlay, soft light. Whew. I'm not liking any of these.
But it's a great example of seeing how the different, with such a simple image,
Mm-hmm.
see the effects.
In fact, I'm going to leave soft light on, and I'm going to draw down the opacity a little bit. Because I actually do like what it's doing up here. I just don't like that it's darkened my grass more. See, this is the beauty of textures. It forces us absolutely to look in our image and see what we like and what we don't like, and have a feel for how we can affect the image. But it really forces us to look in our photographs. And I think it's one of the reasons that I very quickly developed whatever ability I have to analyze an image like immediately and say, oh, this has to be lightened, that has to be darkened, we need a vignette on this, or that has to be changed. Like very quickly, okay? And I think my mentoring students would chime in here and agree with that. I hope you would. And I think that teaching myself this texturing back in 2008 and 2009 really improved my ability to do that. So I know that it's going to help you with your general editing on your photo. Now, what I said was that I like what it's doing in the top of the image. I like the effect that it's having on that sky, but I think that it made my bottom too dark. So I put a mask on, remember, by going down to our little rectangle with a circle and just clicking on that and it on my active layer, and there's my mask. And now I'm going to go and pick my brush, make sure that I'm painting in black on a white mask. My opacity is still at 23%. And I'm just going to paint out some of that effect on the bottom so I can see my grass again. I just didn't want that all to go away. And here's a very small thing. Maybe I want to bring my building in a little bit. But one of the things that I enjoy the most in this image is this tiny bit, this tiny line of brighter green that delineates the cut Timothy from the not cut Timothy. So if I go back in there and I take off that texture layer, I can see that line again. Okay? So before, after. So, okay, I like it well enough. It's on the way to becoming something. And then I'm going to look at the other images that I chose, and that doesn't seem like it's going to do very much, so I'm going to just get rid of him. My Scotia I've already used, so I'm going to close that out and say thank you very much. I'm going to click on Contre-jour. I don't know what that's going to do, so let's just look and see. I'm going to go Command T. I'm going to move my window back up here so I can see it. I'll pull this out. Hold my Shift key and pull that out to the side, which changes the ratio. Click my check mark and say OK. And now I'm going to look and see. Ooh, I like the sky like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
Ooh, I like what it did in the bottom in the overlay, but I don't like what it did in the sky. Okay, so let's go to multiply and maybe just leave it in our sky, right? So we're going to click on our layer and we're going to grab our brush and we're painting in black. We're going to paint it out along the bottom. And maybe not all. Is everybody watching that little layer mask over there too and seeing what's happening to it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then if I want to get up here and get this window, a smaller brush, and bring that line in. Okay. All right. So before, after.
Karen,
Yes.
what you're doing now doesn't impact the previous layer at all. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, nothing at all on the previous layer. And I can see with my painting, I was a little bit sloppy and I have this little halo around here. So I'm going to change to white, which reveals, remember black blocks and white reveals. And I'm going to bring back in the texture layer here so I don't have a halo. halos are the hallmark of sloppy, unprofessional work. We don't like them. Okay. All right. Very good. So I don't think I want it at 100%. I think I want it somewhere here. So before, after. Now, I still think I need more light in my building. So I'm going to introduce a new concept, okay? I'm on my top layer. I'm going to introduce an adjustment layer, okay? And if we hover over that little black and white circle, someone called it a New York cookie one time. We click on that. I'm going to go to a curves adjustment, and I want to bring up the light in my darker tones. Now I'm only looking at my building. I'm looking a little bit at my grass, but I'm only really worried about my building. And I kind of like that. So now I'm going to hit, I've made my global adjustment, okay? But I really only want it to show in my building and in the grass. So I'm going to hit Command I, and that has inverted my mask. It made it black. It blocked out everything I did. Everything is there. It's just under a black sheet of plastic, if you could imagine it that way, okay? So I'm going to bring my white brush back in now and reveal in my building the change that I made. And I just want my building to have a little more light in it. And you see, because I'm working at only 20-some%, I can slowly bring it back in. And I'm going to get a small brush and get this line nice. Come down here, bring that up. And if we have a look at my layer mask on the right-hand side, you will see that I have a little house-shaped white hole in it. Okay, can you see over here?
Mhm.
That's my little building. I'm going to go in the building itself and just bring some more light into it. Okay, I kind of like that. And now I'm just going to add one swipe at 20% to bring in this grass a little bit. You see on my layer mask how it's, you know, it's not over the whole thing. It's just to add a little bit of light in the grass. So this was before, this was after. Before, after. And of course, it's infinitely adjustable because first we started working with a brush that was only at 23% opacity. And we also can turn our opacity down over here. So that's kind of before and then after. And I could put it somewhere in the middle if I felt I got it too much, but I didn't. I like it at 100%. Okay. Now, yes?
Karen, to the left of the building, yeah, that area, if you wanted to get rid of that, could you reset your ratio on the texture and drag it way off to the side so that disappeared?
That is in my original image, my dear.
Oh, so it is.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Yeah, those are those little trees in my original image. Okay.
How could you bring those out a bit? By removing the, going back and working on the layer mask?
Yes, you could bring them out by, let's say we wanted to, let's turn this off. If this was the layer that obscured them a great deal, then we could go in and click on our layer mask and we could change our brush to black and we could paint out a lot of the effect of this layer.
Thank you.
Okay, but bringing them out in this image is a whole different kettle of fish because it's foggy. So here they are. Now we have affected it. We can see them a little better than what we could see before. Okay. Now, again, I mean, this is a pretty extreme image, but I did want to do something very simple and show you how a texture really affects. I mean, this is the plainest sky going. It's just fog, you know, and fog is the great equalizer. Everything becomes the same. And so sometimes adding a texture layer into something like that can improve it.
Karen, is the adjustment layer, so if you got that far and then you go, oh my gosh, I need to clone out a big dust thing or whatever, so you wanted to use other Lightroom tools like the clone or is that what you would do with that? Is that how you get to those tools? Use an adjustment layer?
Not Lightroom tools, but Photoshop tools. But the answer is no.
Right.
Adjustment layers are all of these layers that we see. And the first three, don't worry about. The next ones, brightness and contrast, don't do it. Levels, curves, and exposure are areas that we would work in. Vibrance, hue and saturation, color balance, black and white, photo filter, yes. Okay, channel mixer and color lookup, that's very advanced Photoshop work. Please do not even think about it right now. But so not brightness and contrast, but levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, hue and saturation, color balance, black and white, photo filter, yes. Now, to answer your question, what you need to do to create a clone layer is to add a duplicate layer, just a blank layer, name it clone, okay? And then grab your clone tool and have at it,
Okay.
okay? But so a cloning layer is not an adjustment layer. An adjustment layer is one of those things that I mentioned.
So that was just adding.
That is this little, the
Just a
second,
layer.
the little second one in, add a layer, okay?
Oh.
I'm gonna trash that one. Alrighty,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Okay, I'm gonna get really crazy and we're gonna add this one in. Everybody okay for time? We've got a few more minutes. Is that all right for everyone?
Mhm.
Okay. Now I chose this because it has a vignette in it and it's going to make the center of my image brighter depending on which blending mode I use. And it's going to make a very old-timey look and a creepy look around the edges. So let's see what we've got. And I'm going to change my blending mode. Darken makes it look very weird. Multiply is way too dark, although I kind of like it. Let's go to overlay and soft light. So I think everyone can see the effect of what's going on here. So if we do it in overlay and we take the opacity down, and we might want to go back to our curves layer now and add even more light into our building.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Okay. So here was before. Now I've added all that extra light in the building, and here's the after.
Why
Oh.
did that adjustment in your tonal, why did it impact the building? Could you go back to that one again, please, for a second?
Sure. So here's my curves layer. And the key here is to look at the layer mask, because when you put a layer on, it affects everything below it, okay? And so in this instance, I put the layer mask on and then I painted in, you know, to reveal the effect that I had in my building. In fact, I'm going to reveal it even a little bit more. All right. So I'm painting in my mask where I had my curves. I'm painting in my mask where I had my curves to reveal a little bit more of the building and even the grass down here. Okay. Here we are. And look, see, I got a halo again. I'm going to hit X. I'm going to turn my brush black and I'm going to clean that up because halos are bad. Okay. There we go. It's looking better. So by choosing, going back to my curves layer to see that effect, I can, you know, add in or take out a lot of the lightness that I put into there. And I like it light like that.
It doesn't seem to be affecting the sky. Is that true? Or is it
It's not affecting the sky, Ruth, because the only place that I revealed this curves adjustment was where I painted out my solid black mask to reveal the curves adjustment.
Got it.
Okay. Before, after. It's a little extreme, but for illustrative purposes, I think it served our purpose here.
Really helps.
Okay. All right. We're getting close to our time. I'm going to stop sharing. And hello, everybody. So
we're exhausted. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
And it's only morning for us.
Yes, yes. Sorry, it is very challenging brain work. Okay, but this is why we're doing this over and over and over again. So
it really helps.
Good.
Great.
Thank you. So tonight I'm going to send you more textures, and we're going to meet again on the 4th of July, if that's okay with everyone. Same time.
Nobody's going anywhere that I know of.
Yeah. Okay. So
we'll be happy to celebrate with you.
Thank you, because no one here will be celebrating. That's for sure.
You can join us.
Okay, so I'll see you in 2 days, but before that you'll have both of the sessions that we've done will go up onto the website sometime tomorrow, and also you'll have all of the rest of the textures. And I would like for you to play a little bit with the textures that you have from today. It doesn't matter what the textures are. All I want you to do is to practice the concepts of bringing the texture in and getting it onto your image layer, okay?
Karen, could I ask you one more question,
Please.
So I'm collecting all these textures. What's the best way to organize them? I thought that I would organize them by tone, but so that I don't have to look through every one all the time. Or what are your suggestions about that?
Well, you're talking to the queen of disorganization in her textures. I have all 750 or like close to 1,000 textures now in one place.
Ah!
and so I look at them. One thing I will tell you, I look at them in larger thumbnails than people usually do. It's impossible to have an idea of what the texture really looks like if you look at it and an icon that looks like the size of a file folder. So if you go to your desktop and you click on the word and you have Finder at the top and you move over to where it says View, at the bottom of that it says Show View Options, and you can increase the size of your icons. Okay, so when you're looking at those small little thumbnails, they can become bigger and start looking like half the size of a business card. And from there you can get an idea of what they look like. You certainly could organize them if you were going to go to the trouble, which is probably wise. You might want to put them in pastels. I would use one as pastels or more solid colors, and then I would use one as foggy because there are a lot of textures that have a very foggy look to them. And then one that has edges, the word edges in it, which is the last image, or the last one we put on that image. It was much more of an edge. It came out of the tin type edges package. Yeah, so I would just look at names for them that way. The reason that I don't do that is because I don't want to have to open a whole bunch of file folders. I want to see all my textures at once, because after a while, they'll start to speak to you, and you'll be scrolling through, and it happens very quickly, and you say, oh, I like this one, let me try that. And I don't think that I would get to that point if I were having to open 5 or 6 or 7 different file folders. That would annoy me.
Do you ever put the name of the texture on the layer to remind you?
Yes,
Just name that layer with that texture. So that
Yes.
you remember.
yes, it's a very good practice.
Karen,
Mhm.
if I have a photo that I already have worked on in Photoshop, it's many layers, and then I decide that I want to add a texture to it.
Mhm.
What's the easiest way to add it to an existing photo? in
I
Photoshop?
would make a copy of that photo, Susie,
Okay.
and then I would flatten all of that work so that
Oh.
it doesn't become enormous, okay? And then start adding texture layers.
Okay.
I would duplicate that photo, then flatten it, use the F word, and then start putting your texture layers on,
Okay. Thank you.
okay? Any other questions for right now? Okay, well, I think we did very, very well. I encourage you to send me email questions in the meantime, and I'll see you in another 2 days, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you,
Thank
Karen.
you. Be well. See you soon.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.